Here we're at a house that was exposed to the crown fire that extends all the way around except for down the canyon from the house. And the first impression when you walk in here is that the crown fire obviously caused this house to burn down, and that this house didn't stand a chance. But the one thing I want to point out right away is that there's quite a distance, well, there is a distance of clearing between the trees and where the house is located. And I also want to point out the things that are remaining, the things that are unconsumed in this scene that are between the house and the crown fire as we pan across. There's absolutely no doubt but what this was an intense fire environment at the time that it burned. It burned extremely intensely. Now we'll go up and we'll take a look at those things that still remain between the destroyed house and the crown fire to see if we can get a sense of maybe what the heat exposure was to the house from this crown fire, and maybe get a clue as to at least categorically what burned this house down. As you can see, we've got things that are left between the house and this crown fire, and that can give us a clue as to what the exposure was to the house from the crown fire. That is, how much heat the house was getting from this crown fire. The first thing we'll look at is this rototiller. And the thing that I concentrated, well, the first thing that I did was I made sure that the rototiller wasn't moved out here after the fire. So the indication there is the stuff that is unburned right in a line up there. So I determined that this was here during the fire. They had moved it out because it's got gasoline in the tank, still has gasoline in the tank. And one of the things that I noticed was the foam hand grips. They're somewhat melted, but they're not totally melted. And the plastic in the ends are not melted, and nor is this plastic brake grip melted. And these are highly vulnerable to high intensity heat. They would have been dripping off, they would have totally been melted away. The next thing that I looked at to give me a clue as to how much energy, and oh, by the way, let me just mention that this rototiller is about 40 feet from the house, and it's about 45 feet from where the first trees are for the crown fire. So this didn't receive enough heat to melt the things that are highly sensitive to the heat. So we've got a clue here that this house didn't receive sufficient amount of energy in order to ignite the wood siding. Well, let's take a look at something else, another side of the house, and I want to show you something over here. Now, 9 days ago, this was wilted and green. That is the strawberries and the tomatoes, and there's a gradient here. There's a diminishing amount of scorch all the way to just nothing but wilt in this garden. Here, close to the crown fire, we've got the plants scorched and burned. And as we move across the garden, we see that we move into a location where the plants were just partially scorched and mostly wilted, to the point of where we get to the tomatoes. And although you can't really see it now that it's been almost 2 weeks later, there was no scorch on these tomatoes. There was only wilt. Obviously the tops were killed, and there was deformation on this PVC, this polyvinyl little garden picket, but there was no significant melting. So that is an important clue also It takes much less energy in order to deform and to melt vinyl than it does to ignite the side of this home. The next thing that I want to show you is over here, this wood glider. And that's a real important clue for this side of the house. Now we've covered really one side of the house that faces the crown fire. Now let's take a look at another side of the house that faced the crown fire. The wood glider on this side, and the question is, well, was it here? And indeed it was, because we can see the footprint here where it had been sitting while the crown fire came through, and this was all green, by the way, instead of just that little patch under the foot. So in fact it was here. And this side of the glider that's facing the crown fire isn't at all scorched. And this is about 60 feet from where most of the crown fire was, from the edge of where most of the crown fire was. But when we go onto the house side of this glider, we notice that the burning of the house was sufficient to cause the glider to continue to burn and finally burn through it at one of the points, and the house side legs actually fell over. Now what that also tells us is that this house was burning considerably after this crown fire passed through the area. What ignited this house and burned it down were the little things. Now I don't know exactly what those were on this house, but the little things, the pine needles up next to the wooden deck or on the deck, perhaps even patio furniture. You'll notice that they've got patio furniture here on what was the deck. If there had been cushions on that patio furniture, that could have caught firebrands, ignited, and burned the house down. As you can see, the crown fire came down the creek and was a pretty continuous crown fire. Came across in front of the house over here, as well as on this side roughly to the west of the house. It's a pretty extensive front of crowning. Don't know exactly